Well, let's get started. Good afternoon, and welcome to our Alumni Insights webinar on effective cyber learning, featuring Marguerite Haldin and Shelby Bassinger, graduates of the Duquesne School of Education. I'm Sarah Speary, the AVP of Alumni Engagement, and I'm excited to have you join us today. Before we jump into the introduction of our moderator and presenters, I'd like to take a moment to thank my colleague and alumna, Audrey Tierney, Associate Director of Alumni Engagement, for arranging for this program. Audrey will be managing the technical aspects of the webinar. Throughout the presentation, your microphones will be muted, but you're welcome to submit questions or comments through the chat feature found on the toolbar on the bottom of the screen. Pre-submitted questions and those received through the chat will be addressed time permitting following the presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator. A familiar face around the Duquesne School of Education, Dr. Fran Serenka is a leading practitioner scholar in the areas of education leadership, administration, and supervision. She directs the educational administration and supervision programs, preparing principals, supervisors, and superintendents for their work in schools. She is a member of the Pennsylvania Leadership Development Center, offering professional development for educational leaders in the areas of customized learning, innovation, and collaboration, helping organizations implement the most effective leadership practices. For all of these reasons and so many more, we're pleased to have Dr. Serenka serve as the moderator for our program today. Fran, I'll turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. I am excited to be joining you as the moderator for this program, and we have two fine representatives from the School of Education to be your learning facilitators. I'm familiar with the celebrated professional work of both of these fine educators. Let me start with an introduction of our presenters. Dr. Marguerite Haldin is a graduate of Duquesne University's doctoral program in educational leadership. She is a K-5 reading specialist for the North Allegheny Cyber Academy and an advocate for literacy, equity, and innovation. She has taught various literacy courses as an adjunct professor at Duquesne and California University of Pennsylvania. Marguerite actively networks with education professionals to provide pathways for innovation and opportunity for underserved populations. She has served as a teacher in various educational settings, including private, charter, Montessori, and public K-12 schools. She was previously a K-12 reading specialist and math support teacher for the Allegheny Intermediate Unit non-public schools program, 5th grade ELA teacher, and a 5th and 6th grade science teacher before her current role as reading specialist and math support teacher. Her dissertation was focused on beliefs literacy specialists hold regarding processes that assist struggling reading and comprehension of informational text. Along with Dr. Haldin is her colleague, Shelby Bassinger. Shelby is a graduate of Duquesne University's Early Childhood Pre-K4 program, the class of 2013, and of the Master's in Instructional Technology program in 2019. She is a 2nd grade reading and English language arts teacher in North Allegheny's Cyber Academy. She believes in teaching the whole child and works to instill the love and support of learning in her students in a virtual classroom. I'm excited to hear what both of you have to tell us today, so I'll turn the program over to you, and I'll join you afterwards for Q&A.
Thank you, Dr. Serenka. That was a wonderful introduction. It's always so odd to hear all those things about yourself, but where we've come, it's just crazy in this past year. So I'm absolutely so blessed to be part of this webinar series, and thank you to my colleague Shelby. We work together pretty closely in the virtual world. So Shelby, little small fun fact, we met as I was her teacher for an adjunct course at Duquesne, an assessment course. So it's a true networking success story because she told me about this job at North Allegheny, and here I am. So a little fun fact about Shelby and I, but we are going to get started. So we'll kind of take turns back and forth here to go over what to expect. So we are going to talk about both the process and the product of student and teacher learning that have proved to be effective and engaging. First, we'll talk about the 3 keys to getting connected and staying engaged, and then we will go into some high interest, engaging content and some effective strategies that we have found for online learning. And we will take questions and answers at the end. If you didn't submit one previously, you're welcome to add that in the chat along the way if something comes to mind. So I wanted to start with this quote because as you can see, it talks about technology not replacing great teachers, but if you put technology in the hands of great teachers, it can truly be transformational. And I have found that to be true the past year, working for North Allegheny and working with some absolutely phenomenal educators that truly try their best to use technology as a tool and truly just focus on the child first. So that is really another thing that I want to share. There's not a whole lot, this isn't overly research heavy, but there's one little research slide I wanted to share with you. And I always come back to teacher efficacy, because if the teachers, the collective teacher efficacy, so the teachers in our cyber academy, we have, I believe, over 90 teachers in our cyber academy. And we have an amazing, amazing leader. Our principal is absolutely an advocate for us at all times and for our students. And so I like to kind of focus on this statistic by John Hattie, because he did a meta-analysis about what works in education. And really what it comes down to is if the teachers as a whole feel that they can affect student achievement and they can make a difference, they will make a difference, right? There is a very strong effect size there. So, I feel that very blessed that this is the case in our setting, that we really do have a group of teachers that feel this way. And if that's not the case, you know, there are some things that you can really do to change that. But our focus today is on that digital learning. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Shelby to talk about those 3 keys that I introduced.
Thank you, Marguerite. It's been so lucky to be working with you this year and making that transition from Duquesne now to NA. I started in the kindergarten classroom, worked my way up to a 2nd grade classroom. But when you were discussing about the connection to your colleagues, it has been such a blessing this year. We have so many now that you really are the most impactful to your students. So it can get a little cumbersome and a little overwhelming with all of the options of technology that you have at your fingertips, but you are in control of what you deliver to your students and what you choose to be the leading path for them. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our 3 kind of key parts that we find to be successful, which is continuity, connection, and accountability, and creating this space for your students that is somewhat predictable in an unpredictable setting. And we kind of struggled between continuity and connection. Which one comes first? They're both so incredibly important. But the rhythm and the routine that you structure in itself needs to be nailed down as best as you can within the limits that you have. Your district or whomever you're working with may have recommendations that you need to meet, but ultimately it is up to you how you structure your room. So once you have that structure, you're able to then pick and pool how you spend those sacred minutes of synchronous learning and what that looks like for your children. So we're going to go ahead and start with the continuity piece, which is that rhythm and routine that you set up for your students. As we said, this is a predictable routine in the most unpredictable settings. And what that looks like for us, I run the ELA piece with a colleague of mine. So we have 2 pockets in our scheduled day, which is a 2.5-hour window. In the morning is ELA, in the afternoon is the math and the either science or social studies piece, and we flip. So we always start our morning as a class with a rise and shine morning check-in, just like you maybe have experienced in your elementary setting, and making those connections is so important in the morning. Our expectation for the kiddos with our families is to introduce the content and then kind of let them go. But our principal has given us the grace to structure our minutes really how we best see for our students. as long as we still maintain an understanding of hitting these standards. So we definitely establish a connection first thing. There is about an hour of whole group instruction, which is no longer really how it looked like in brick and mortar anymore. The time really has truly had an opportunity to become flipped, where we are now applying the skills the children have been working on before. The flexible and small group instruction, as well as asynchronous work, happens simultaneously. If you could advance the next slide, please, where it is truly, we spend that time together and then they break apart. And depending on the small group that you're working with for the day, the other children are left to be working on those asynchronous tasks, during which are recorded direct instruction, explicit instruction videos that you're no longer spending those sacred minutes sharing, and assessments. We know children spend their energy and their show what you know time, which really truly should be independent, and taking that time to do independently. Whereas I can then pull a small group. I have 4 different groups. We meet twice a week during this time at a scheduled time. So again, that structure of, when you log in and you have an alarm set, and we go through all those steps on how to do that so that you come and you join and you learn with us at that time. And at that time is whenever we are making those discussions, the annotations, we connect with one another. So it's really meaningful in a smaller space. And then of course, as we know for our standards with how we should end lessons, right? We of course come back and reconnect everyone together. So this year, truly, the structure has been so influential and key for the communication with families, the communication with parents, the expectations, and the overall delivery of instructional material.
I'll also share, I'll just interject that my schedule looks a little bit different from Shelby's because of my role as an interventionist. So I meet with groups throughout the day during a scheduled time that is similar in the school set, in the regular education setting, and also in the in-person setting. But we have, North Allegheny has adapted what's called WIN time. So if you're not familiar with that acronym, it stands for What I Need Time. So it's great because in years prior, I, as an interventionist in the non-public school, I would pull students out of social studies class or out of whatever time we could find. And so this WIN time really is helpful for me as an interventionist because I'm able to see students at a scheduled time, that they're not missing anything else. They're truly getting what they need. This is also the time that our goal students, which is our gifted students, get to also get some enrichment. And then Shelby can work with, or the regular education teachers can work with those students that kind of fall right in the middle there. Right. So it's great to be able to have that for me, as an interventionist, because they're not feeling like they're missing something.
And to Marguerite's point, and to bounce right off of it, there's a huge difference in virtual versus brick and mortar. We know if we're in brick and mortar, we have a set amount of resources and a set amount of time in which those resources can be applied. And with this virtual setting, we have those minutes carved out of our multi-tiered system of support already for MTSS. Children go to goal, and we say, go to your WIN teacher. But really what we're doing is being able to send them to all of the different resources within NACA that we now have. I have children going to specialists in different buildings that I would not have had in the traditional setting, or they were pulled out for additional support during a whole group instruction time. So the flexibility has been wonderful. Mm-hmm. And our second connection is, of course, that SEL connection. They're not going to jump on board with you unless you're with them. So that's definitely, like we said, we have to find that balance for sure.
So I'm going to just share one of the resources that I have implemented with my students in social emotional learning, which that's what SEL stands for, if you're not familiar. That quick, important check-in I have found to be the way the single way for me personally to make sure that my students log in. they want that connection. To be in this virtual world, it's very difficult for them to have that time that normally in the regular classroom setting they would have homeroom time where they can just chat. They have recess time, they have lunch time, and all those times are really at home by themselves. So that social emotional learning aspect is so very important. So I begin each class with our mood meter, and this was not created by me, but shared with permission, just for the slides. The mood meter really is a way for them to click and drag their name on the left, and they drag it into whichever zone of regulation that they are feeling at the time. So they really identify their space, and then they think the next step would really be to think about what steps that they need to take to get to a better place. And I do that pretty informally in my intervention groups, but they can move it more. There's a specific slide for each of them, and then they can click and drag a specific, like which word would describe that, they would call it a feeling word, right? So right now I could click and drag and say, I'm feeling excited, and I would be in the yellow. And then I have them do a little journal entry, which also incorporates writing and like a free write. Especially for my 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade intervention students. All intervention students could do this, but definitely the 3rd through 5th are more comfortable with it. So this would be an example of a journal page. So, they could write about, I'm excited that PSAS are over. So I wrote about that. My 5 whole days of being in person this year were all to administer state standardized assessments. So there we are. That is the world we're in. But that's what I use to incorporate just a way for them to really have an outlet. And they love it. And if I either like forget or think, for sake of time, they will let me know. No, we have to do our mood meter first. So I realize how much they really look forward to it, because even if I try to just say, why don't you just tell me how you feel real quick? And no, they want to do the whole, all the steps. So
you've established that routine, so they have to stick with
exactly.
it.
Yep, for sure. So you can't skimp on that routine. They love it and need it very much. So
and
anything else you want to add about social emotional learning, Shelby?
I think this year, truly, it has been such a focus this year. I think our administrator made sure that, on our Wednesday schedule, it looks a little bit different. There's that time that is set aside for it. Ours looks a little bit different in our classroom, just because we use it as our attendance question, and we have some fun with it. Would you rather, go to Disney or go to, those sorts of things. And we kind of get to know each other personality wise as well. This morning, it was pros and cons of virtual learning, because coming into this presentation, I wanted to know where we were right now. We have about 30 instructional days left, and we started this journey, as everyone knows, almost a year ago. So their mood meter has changed not only day to day, lesson to lesson, but over a course of a year. So that connection, I think, lowers some walls. They're able to connect with each other. We utilize Blackboard as our LMS, and we use Google Meets as our synchronous time. So those are the 2 platforms we juggle with the most. And we are able to send them into their Google Meet groups and really have that collaboration time without the teacher. And to have that little conversation, pose the question, have a moment to discuss. And I think having that space to do it, sometimes they get stunned, like, wait, we're doing what? That she wants us to do what? And then having these connections makes it easier for everyone to participate and really challenge themselves. So we'll slide into our 3rd piece here, which is, of course, the accountability. And I think this was the most overwhelming part when we started this journey. What are the apps that we want to use? How is this going to look? What do we do? In terms of just hardware, truly, we each have a little symphony of orchestration happening with monitors and mutes and unmutes and pieces and manuals and everything that needs to be lined up ready for the day. So you as the teacher, the most influential part, what do we use? This is our SAMR model, which I was introduced to at Duquesne. If it's not something you're fluent in. It is truly the progression in which you want to implement technology into your instruction and how that looks with your instruction. And I will tell you that you strive for the redefinition. You really want to get there where they are recreating everything. But like anything, you must start with simple substitution. And when you introduce a new app, you use that app for the entire week for all of the different levels so that they are able to truly navigate the app. Because the first time you log in, it's a process, right? You think back in kindergarten how, okay, we have to remember left versus right, upper left corner, upper right corner, share my screen. How do I log in? What's the PIN look like? So the very first time you use it, it's not exactly how you envision it, right? You want it to be something where they have a user-friendly experience and they feel like their participation matters instead of frustrated that they can't log in. So that'd be a tip for me, is that you want to make sure that you keep it simple at first, so that now in April, when we're into this, we have many, many, many tools that we can pull from. My other colleague who teaches math, she does the same idea where I introduce the platform or the app in ELA, and then she'll also support with the same app in like a day or two. So that's been really helpful for the structure for the kids. Whenever you think about which app you would like to integrate, if there are some limits, of course, with the district that you are with, because what the children have access to versus what the teacher has access to will be different. But there are so many social outlets that you can tap into to ask for recommendations, but it boils down to what is going to be the easiest path for you and your children to make the connections of learning. I'm not going to pick the app that takes forever for us to navigate and figure out. It's going to be the very simple, most effective pieces. And you want to integrate the bells and whistles, but you'll get there. It just does not have to happen as you're setting it up. The children have a single sign-on, and the children have a platform on their devices that we can make app requests, and it can get pushed to all of the devices. So just some planning things that you need to make sure are okay. Some websites work on the devices, some do not. So you might have this glorified, beautiful idea of what your lesson is going to look like and the connections that you're going to make, and they might fail. So you go back to the tried and true ones and you pull out the whiteboards. Google Meet has made some upgrades this year even based off of feedback with educators, which is amazing. I mean, we're in this world where we are really, truly live time learners, and live time feedback is so influential. With like, how can we improve this? What can we do? And then I'm sure they'll make it not free anymore for us. But until then, we can utilize it in the best way possible in all of the different levels of learning. Some oldies but goodies, some tried and true. No, go ahead, Marguerite.
I was just going to interject and say that, as an interventionist, many of my students, the most basic thing that most of my students are struggling with is reading, obviously, as a reading interventionist. But what I have found this year, although I have implemented some amazing resources that are actually on this slide, one of the things that I have found so helpful, and also my students are learning how to type way more than they would in person. They're getting really good at typing. But one just like fun little, I'm going to add this in because it was so helpful for me with a chat situation. So something that one of our literacy coaches shared this year was a strategy called Waterfall. And if you're not familiar with this, all the kids type the word in. So say that I'm teaching that long A can make the AI sound, like in train and brain. If I tell them, okay, now type the word train, and they all type it, I found in the beginning of the year, when I was not telling them to say waterfall, that the last student was always just looking at whoever entered, quickly. So it's a great strategy because you can say waterfall, they hit return, and then at the same time, all of their words come up for me, and I'm able to quickly make some recommendations, and say, oh, I noticed that you just have an A. Remember, one A makes the short A sound, that's the short A sound, ah. And so it makes for some great, quick feedback, like you were just talking about, Shelby, with feedback. And it's been so effective because they're not then just looking at whoever hit enter first. But I wanted to share that little strategy because it's been very helpful this year.
These are not new to anyone in this room, but they are solid and they work. Nearpod and Flipgrid for my second graders has still remained amazing, and they continue to make upgrades and updates to both deliver instruction as well as interact with one another, as well as embed things. Again, that student experience is the most important piece here. And Flipgrid is where a space where they are able to comment on each other, see each other's videos. They can be proud of each other's work. It's kind of like the hallway in the school where you can walk by and read everyone's writing. Well, now they're posting it to each other. There are so many different apps that these still remain opportunities and spaces and places where they can do the very, very basic all the way up and beyond. So I still appreciate these. And then now what everyone always asks, what are the pros of online learning versus virtual? I will say that there are many pros, there are many cons. They still remain true that you have a lot of different options this year now that I'm in virtual. With the schedule and the amount of support that you have, the involvement of the parents, what your structure of your classroom looks like, they are all good. And sometimes they are not so good. And that is part of the way that it is. And we work together, we work with colleagues that make you feel like that's okay. And we support each other with it. So I think that the opportunities with virtual has been eye-opening and so wonderful. It has also been limiting in some respects as well. So the pros are equal to the cons, and all of the areas there are good and there are bad.
Okay, so I think that this is a really great pro to cyber learning, and that's that you have the whole world at your fingertips. And as some of you probably have explored this avenue, I heavily explored this avenue in the past year. If we could rewind back to April of, no one wants to, but if we could rewind back to April of 2020, just for the sake of me reflecting on the past year, whenever I was trying to get students to log on at all, I had a 6th grade and 5th grade reading group. And the one day we did a virtual field trip and we read an article that went along with an animal that we were looking at a zoo. And at the very end of last school year, whenever I asked my 5th and 6th graders, in person, virtual, both, all together, what was your favorite thing that we did? And they said the virtual field trip. And so I really started to explore that more and more this year, especially with my 5th grade group, because I had 7 students. So it was a little bit of a large, small group. And so I wanted to really get them engaged and wanted to really try to connect the informational text that we were reading to the real world. So what a better way to do than virtual field trips. And I found this amazing website through Google Earth, I guess it was, the arts and culture had 5 different virtual field trips that they offered. It was the hidden worlds of the national parks. I'm not going to play the whole thing. Can you see the Google Arts and Culture? Is that showing? Okay. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but as you can see, it's absolutely beautiful. You can explore 5 different parks. And it goes through, let me skip the intro so you can see Kenya, I think it's Kenai Fjords National Park, Hawaii volcanoes, Carlsbad Caverns, Bryce Canyon, and Dry Tortugas. So each month we would do, this was like over 5 months, we did, we chose one of the, I had them actually choose on a Google form which one they wanted to go to that month. And so then I would plan all of our reading around that area, whether it was, one day we would read an article about that state. then we would read about maybe the natural resources that were in that national park or the landforms. And they really got to know the place before they virtually traveled to it. They also got such rich vocabulary and engaging learning experiences. I also had them do a virtual passport, which they loved. So it was a great springboard for them to really just create a little bit and kind of look back on the year and think about all the places that we've traveled virtually. And of course, they have created bucket lists now of places they want to go in real life. And along with myself, for sure, I have not been to any of these parks. So close to a couple of them, but definitely not there. So it was just really engaging. And then end of March this year, I had them create a virtual field trip right before, I guess it was March into April, it was right before Easter. I said, I want you to create a virtual field trip. And so it really, got to that high level of engagement and learning. And they worked with a partner. They picked a city or a destination. A lot of them picked museums all over the world. Like one of the students wanted to go to the Natural History Museum in London. And they really were interested in London. So they did this whole, whole presentation and really worked together in breakout rooms with their partner and created slides and then presented right before Easter. And I know I had some colleagues actually that did not do this and were like, did any of your kids log in today? And I said, yeah, they all logged in because they had to present. So, it gave that engagement piece the extra bump because they had stake in the conversation and they had stake in, I want to show my classmates our virtual field trip. And it was just so much fun. So I always like to add that in that, yes, as an interventionist, a lot of the times you're in the driver's seat and you are steering the lesson, and students can create and can be in the driver's seat if given the proper supports and scaffolds and modeling. And it really, that's what gives you chills. And that's what, that makes you think like, oh, okay, like they have learned something, and there's so many standards that you can pull from for something like this and really that you can meet. So it was a lot of fun. And I just was really excited to share that because I think my students really enjoyed it as well. So I have a couple links here and we will share the slides so that you can go ahead and click through these links. There's a short video on hand signals. I know Shelby and I both utilize these, especially when you have a larger group. I don't use them as much with my small groups, but when you have 29 little faces looking at you and you can say, is this agree? I think it is. Yeah. What does it mean?
Me too. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. So if you can see 29 people go, me too, or 10 of them can agree with something, it's very helpful. And they also don't have to unmute themselves and tell the whole story along with it. They can just quickly agree. Another thing I wanted to share was just about, we've learned a lot about blended learning this year at North Allegheny, because that's truly what we're doing. It's not just cyber, it's not just a fully asynchronous or fully synchronous. And we have some things that we're doing, some of each. So I found this idea book that I just wanted to share. And it was really helpful for me. It's actually where I first found the virtual field trip link for the hidden worlds of the national parks. Another resource I wanted to share was just an article about strategies to encourage students to turn on their cameras. I know, especially in the older grades, that was, my fifth graders had their cameras turned off often, although I fully support allowing students to turn off their cameras because sometimes you don't want to see what's going on. So I definitely tell them and encourage them, if it's appropriate, definitely turn off your camera. But it's also helpful to have the cameras turned on for the majority of the lesson so that you can see, especially when I'm working with letter names and sounds, I need to see their mouth, especially my younger students. So I encourage them to turn on their cameras and really interact. And there's a lot of fun strategies in that article. And then lastly, there's a great article to support It's just a short video on if stronger social emotional skills are linked to better attendance, behavior, and grades. And that video will get you down a wormhole, because there's a lot of great videos that, much like any video, you decide, oh, and then there's another video. But the man who created that video, or they have some great resources out there. So we're going to shift into our questions. This first question, how did you design your online classes differently than in classroom classes? So I'm going to let Shelby start with this one, and I might add a few things after she answers. But
please do. I know there are many different ways to do this, right? There are so many suggestions and ideas out there of what it should or should not look like, and opinions. I think this year, the way I have designed the instruction has really been a shift in time and a shift in thinking about my own profession and what I do with the kids when I do it. I think this year has been an opportunity to be like, you know what, we don't need to do this one together. This is an opportunity for you to do it, and then for us to do this instead in a different way. So I think prioritizing the items that you want to use during that synchronous learning time when you are with a whole entire class versus what you do in your smaller group versus what you do independently has really shifted. The articles that we were reading about flipped classrooms, it's happening, and it's no longer with traction from colleagues. It's like, they're like, oh yeah, why didn't we do this? It's everyone was kind of shifted into this, not by choice, but it has been a great blessing because of it. So I think bringing on your colleagues into in a forward-thinking mind that you were with a few people has now grown tremendously. So I think that in person, the structure of, okay, we're going to have instruction on this, we're going to practice it, I do, we do, you do, has changed in the timeline a little bit. That process is still happening, but the I do is by yourself as a recording. The we do is together. The you do is, again, staggered. It's like steps. And the pieces that I choose to use have obviously shifted. In the Cyber Academy, the families had a pickup day once a month for resources and materials. And we had to think pretty far in advance, about 3 months in advance, as to what we wanted them to have physically in their hands. And when the conversation came up, so I was in charge of all of second grade for the district ELA, and it's, really prioritizing and stripping down, okay, this is from the resource, everything else is design as you go, and having that flexibility to do so and the autonomy to do so with the support of our administration. So I think just the way it looks truly is up to you. And I also hate that answer because it's too open, but it really has been wonderful.
So something that I have to give a shout out to my 4 colleagues that are interventionists along with me, something that has been invaluable for me as not only a new virtual teacher like many of us are, I unfortunately was not blessed with the amazing Duquesne education that Shelby received for all of the technology aspect. Even though I have my reading specialist and my educational leadership degrees, I think there was much of the virtual world that I had to learn this year. And then on top of that, this is my first year at North Allegheny. So it's kind of like a double whammy for me at the beginning of the year. And I was very, very blessed because we are so large, I was not the only reading specialist. There are 5 interventionists, and the 5 of us really put our heads together at the beginning of the year and thought about that age-old term, work smarter, not harder, and creating all of these resources. You're essentially a curator of Google Slides. And we decided as a team that kindergarten is its own kind of monster. The students can be at lots of different levels. So we each created our kindergarten lessons independently. And then our 1st through 5th grade lessons, we really divided and conquered each week and shared resources. And then you can adapt them to meet the needs of your learners and those quick in the moment things, but you had somewhere to start. And each of us would really keep close eye on our district's pacing calendar so that we knew what was happening in the second grade classroom. And obviously we'd check in with our classroom teachers and say, is this where you are? Are you feeling like they need more support in one way or another? And it was great because I wasn't spending my entire weekend making, okay, now I have to make all my first grade lessons, now all my second grade, and to truly create valuable, engaging resources takes time. We've all learned that. So to have a staff that's really willing to share and to not feel as though, anyone is taking more or less of the credit. It's truly a team effort. It goes back to that collective teacher efficacy that I mentioned at the beginning. That is how I designed my online classes. That is very different from my in-classroom classes, because especially the year prior, I was K to 12 in 3 different schools by myself. So I think a lot of the times it was more fly by the seat of my pants. Let's get, what can I do that's most effective? Not necessarily something brilliantly engaging and wonderful. It was just get it done quick and dry. It was like whatever I can do. So it's been so lovely, and just a blessing to have a team that is willing to share constantly and really make engaging lessons, because there's nothing that they've shared that I've been like, nope, not using that. Every single thing I'm like, this is great. I'm putting it, into my plans.
Yeah. And Marguerite, just with this as well, we have used those Google tools to collaborate and share, but it has given us the opportunity to go deeper finally, because I feel like previously we were always like trying to keep our nose above water, trying to get there. And this year, banding together, publishing with everyone, using what we need and what we don't need, and has just been so great that now we can get the depth that we want and that we need.
Absolutely. So another question that we got that we had to consult with a few of our counselor friends to really think about confidentiality, but even in our own settings, when we were thinking about keeping confidentiality while offering online services, some of the great things that we're able to do is number one, headphones, right? I'm here using headphones. So whatever's coming in, audio, I can only hear it. The other nice thing about confidentiality is when you are in the regular school setting, in the brick and mortar setting, and I go to Shelby's classroom and pick up 5 kiddos, it's very apparent that they are working with me. And obviously second graders, most of them are like, can I come too? But you have the occasional student who feels very self-conscious about leaving the other kids, and what are they going to think, and what am I going to miss? I feel like it's more confidential because they all log off and then they go to their own separate settings, and no one knows who goes where. They might, maybe, our older students might realize one student's missing or something, but it's very much, I think, even more confidential in that way for the student aspect. They know where they need to go, what link they need to use, and they're very comfortable with that.
I've also felt that they're a little bit more engaged now. It's truly almost like a one-on-one experience. And we've experienced it too now, living in this Zoom world, where as soon as the session is over and we hit gone, we look around, we're like, oh yeah, I'm a part of this world too. So I think the children have been a little bit even more expressive with what they feel and what they think. And you are the only one hearing it, and you're the only one listening to it. Marguerite, I completely agree.
Yeah. And sometimes you will get the occasional, friend or family member walking around in the background. But I think that too, although a blessing and a curse, again, we've seen a window into our students' home life that also helps us to understand our students more. If they're constantly muting and hiding their video, and their home life is, maybe they have 5 siblings that are all trying to do virtual learning, it helps us to get a better idea and pulse on like, okay, how can I make this better for them? Because you can truly see their home situation. If it's I had students logging in from outside playing basketball. I've had students logging in from everywhere, literally all over the world. So it's just been interesting having that window, but also the confidentiality piece is very crucial. And I've never forced a child to share their video. And I think that's another way you can be confidential is maybe a child really just doesn't feel comfortable in the space that they have for that day to online learn. So I have had students who maybe will say to me, I'm not turning my video on today. I have some students with social emotional needs that will type in the chat, not today. And I know what that means. I know that means today is not a good day. I'll log in for class, but I will not share my video. And I respect that and appreciate that because it's a way for that student to still get the content they need and they still participate and unmute whenever they need to, but it allows them to just listen and digest the content, but not have to fully participate in the way where they would in the classroom, right? They'd probably take a sick day. They probably wouldn't come to school that day. So I feel like in that way, we've had good attendance too, because they can easily log in and hide their video if they're having a rough day. So I hope that answers that question. It is a tough one though. I think it's one that we always are thinking about, right? It's a blessing and a curse to have that window into a student's home life because it's great to see, but sometimes it's also not as confidential for that student. Maybe they don't want you to know, what their home life's like, much like our blurred backgrounds that we'll sometimes need to have. Okay, so our next question is, what is the best way to stay informed about new technology? And also, how do you evaluate tech for effective education?
Yes, I think,
Shelby.
Yeah, I think in a world where we are surrounded by technology all the time now, it's even more important to kind of sift through to decide what is going to be effective and efficient and what is not. I think still Edutopia is solid to give suggestions and ideas. I think, all the TED Talks, although very long or makes you think about the way you think and think about how you can influence your students, all the way down to simple social media. I have, a few, like my personal account, but teacher accounts as well, to connect with teachers who you might not have been able to connect with before. The Instagram, the TikTok, things that you like, that's not for professional use. Is now having a space for professional use at this point in a quick way to be like, oh, I never thought about that. Ooh, let me try that. Ooh, yeah, maybe that one. Ooh. And then you have an opportunity to peek at it. And it's like, if it's easy to use and it's going to be effective for my kids, let's try it. Why not? Everyone's kind of on board with it. But that comes with precaution as well. We're adults. We understand. We know what to use and what not to use. But I think I have leaned more on the community this year than anything, with social groups and saying, hey, I have this reading resource, anything else like it? And people were like, here, ping, and just that network has just opened up significantly. And I maybe was a little bit hesitant at first, but now it's phenomenal. I had a student ask me, Ms. Bassinger, can you make another listening library for Brad Meltzer? And I'm going, okay, we learned about Brad Meltzer this week. It takes forever to make this. I hopped on that group. Hey, anyone have it? I got a link literally in 20 seconds, shared it with her. That would have never happened. You would have never been able to do that in brick and mortar like that, doing that, this, that. And they're like, can you put it in the agenda? Can you put the link in? The community for me has been game changing.
Well, and I think in that second half of that question, when we're thinking about evaluating technology to see if it's effective, I think on a research level, we've done a lot of maybe qualitative research, maybe not anything official, but I think that every single day is an opportunity to evaluate the technology, right? So every single class, whether it's in the form of an exit ticket that said, how did you like today's lesson, with a smiley face, a medium face, or a sad face? I mean, those kind of things really have helped me to see, what they're asking for more, right? I know the quizzes website, the second graders love. They always want to go on there. And so it's more interactive than just me telling them, now write on your dry erase board the correct way to spell brain. They can choose from a list, or they can type it in, and then there's fun, graphics, and those endorphins are, just bursting because they're like, oh, yay, I won, or whatever, or I got points. So I think there's been a lot of informal evaluation from the teachers throughout the year. And it's just I think it's so easy to see whenever a lesson has been engaging, because the students stay on. I mean, as simple as they log on with us every single day and have been doing that since August, September, I suppose. But I mean, that in and of itself is an evaluation for how effective it really has been. And we've only lost, since the beginning of the year, maybe 150 students back to. So to give you some background, yeah. So we've had over 1,500 students logging in with us, and every quarter they have the option of going back to brick and mortar. And I think it's a true testament to how well our Cyber Academy has functioned, because very few students have chosen that option. It's truly worked for a lot of our students. So that in and of itself, I think is a testament to how this technology has worked for us and the teachers behind the tech, which is the true testament. Which leads us to our last question that was pre-submitted. And I think we have one more question in the chat, but the last question was, how have you tackled parent engagement and involvement? And this question really, Shelby and I chatted about this because I think it's something it's not something that you can control a whole lot. You can, I suppose you can provide opportunities for parent engagement and involvement in a virtual setting, but we established the role of the learning coach in the beginning of our Cyber Academy and really stuck to that. There are some students that have some great learning coaches, whether it be mom or dad or a babysitter or a sibling, and that has really helped us to make sure that at home, the piece that we can't help with, right? If they're like sharing their screen, but they don't know what to press, or they just don't know where to go, those learning coaches have been invaluable, especially in the first quarter when they were learning all of those different tools that Shelby spoke about before. Anything you want to add to that, Shelby, as far as parent engagement?
I think I've been more connected with my parents this year than in previous years. I think they feel that they can hop on to our meet, right after, hey, can we meet? And it has been so wonderful to be able to do that. So I appreciate that. I think a lot of things have stayed the same with the newsletter, the communication, the expectations. And I think this year we've had a little bit more involvement in terms of what is being submitted for a grade or not. And that's something that we haven't touched on with the technology with assessments, and really being able to get those itemized reports of what we missed. I'm guilty of having a spelling test sit in my bag a couple days too long, and being able to then grade it, then put it in the grade book, then give it back to Johnny. The parents are very involved in that as well. They're like, hey, it's submitted. I'm like, great, we use Blackboard. There's the exclamation point. It was successful. Or, hey, it's timestamped that I don't have record of this. So the parent involvement piece there has also been helpful, and given the kind of support there that I did not feel that was there previously. I am relying on the technology for multiple choice questions, for open-end questions, and things like that. So in those regards, I think that's been helpful and giving almost immediate.
Yeah.
We have one final question from the chat. Marguerite and Shelby, here's the question. What classroom projects have you done that would fall into the redefinition category of education in the SAMR model?
So for me, as an interventionist, I would say that the one that I have already talked about, I don't know if it would fully, and Shelby, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if it would fully fall into redefinition, but when the students created their own virtual field trips, for me, that was very engaging. It was a way that did redefine it. they're rather than logging in and digesting content, right? They had an interactive piece and they were creating on that higher level. It is challenging, even though I can really now at this part in the year, I can start to do some things because a lot of the routines have been so ingrained. But my role as an interventionist is really a lot of drill and practice, because that is truly what many of my students need during the time that I have them. Although I am a complete proponent of, really reinventing the wheel as an interventionist in the way of making things fun, shaking things up. That things don't always have to be constant drill. And so making it fun and engaging is so important to me. But especially in those younger grades, much of it is finding a different way to do the same thing. So, we'll do like find the sight word and they have to click and reveal if underneath that sight word is like a little picture, or like we'll do little things that turn it into a game, but it's nothing probably on that redefinition model category. But it's also because of my unique role in the schools that I'm only able to do, there are some limitations as an interventionist, and it's because it's what I need to focus first on what's best for the students.
And that makes absolute sense for what you, like you said, your limited time with them and what you use. It's also a little bit limiting their age where they are, not to say that they can't redefine the learning where they are, but it has, like you said, finally at this point in the year, we really can. Anywhere where you plug in the word create and their eyes get real big, like, and what can I use? Anything, you can use anything. You can do it however you want. There are some Flipgrids where they can connect to other schools and other countries and things like that, which can then be used as a springboard then for creating their posters in whatever, again, app they want, book creator and things like that. So the open-endedness has really been able to turn the power over to the children to redefine their own space and redefine their own learning in that way, using whatever apps they want. So I think it might not be the redefinition of the technology, but it's of their experience using technology.
Well, it looks like we've come to the end of the questions and the end of our time together today. Marguerite and Shelby, thank you so much for your time today and your great presentation. Hats off to you and all the teachers out there that are doing so much for our students over the past year that has been, way out of your normal realm of expectations. Thank you, Fran, for your help today, and for all of you for carrying out the mission of Duquesne by serving God through serving our students and others. Thank you to all of our alumni and friends for attending today's Alumni Insights. In a follow-up email, you'll receive a copy of this presentation so you can share it and refer to it from time to time. In addition, there'll be a link to provide feedback on the program today. We'll hope you'll take a minute to provide your commentary. If you are an alumnus would like to present an Alumni Insights program, a link to the presenter application will also be in your follow-up email. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe. And as always, go Dukes. Thank you.
Thank you. Go Dukes.
Thank you. Woohoo. Hi, Dr. Shear.